minute here, you're going to hear me discuss a bunch of stuff about soil test results and how we had a big improvement from last year. What I do want to be clear about, though, that I forgot to mention when I was discussing that, is that it's still far from perfect. Like, our soil pH is still 7.7. That is far from ideal. It was 7.8 last year. It's 7.7 now. That is due to the high calcium levels in our soil. So that is a not very ideal growing condition to deal with. Could get into that more, but look at the harvest we got and don't be scared to try to produce something even if your conditions are far from perfect, because you will see what amazing production we had this year, and we still had some things that are very far from perfect. Hey folks, Ariel over here. It's just about to get dark, so I think I'm going to quit for the night, but what we're working on here is putting the garden to bed for the winter. Kind of like I discussed in a few of the videos where we've talked about everything that we've harvested out of here, this is really, I think, the most important part, even though the garden looks pretty much dead. These are strawberries. They're perennial, but all those leaves are dead on top. Basically everything else in the garden beds is empty. I'm about to put garlic back in this one, but I haven't got it in yet, and I've probably got one more day to do that before the ground freezes rock solid and doesn't defrost again. Anyway, I think this is the most important step for getting a good crop, and this year we had a good crop. Last year was probably the worst garden year I ever had for a whole host of reasons. You can go back and watch those videos if you're interested. But this year, I did not, like 2 years ago, I had weighed every single thing we got out of the garden, everything we ate, every bag of lettuce we picked or anything like that. And I think if I remember right, we had about 530 something pounds of produce out of these garden beds. It's the same setup. It's 600 square feet of actual bed space, growing space. So that doesn't count the paths. You can translate that to, the equivalent of whatever bed space you've got. And that was my most record year I'd ever had. This year I did not weigh everything. I kind of only weighed a few of the big bulk things like all the potatoes and the onions and the beets and so on. And I know that I have at least 560 something pounds of produce out of the garden this year, and I didn't weigh any of the lettuce or the strawberries or the zucchini or the peas or the radishes and so on. So I think I had over 600 pounds this year would be a safe estimate. So 600 pounds out of 600 square feet of garden space in 3,300, I can't speak numbers, 6,300 feet above sea level, and in an area that doesn't have a growing days. Those are normally considered the number of days between your last expected frost date in the spring and your first one in the fall. Like where I grew up in southern Pennsylvania, I think my parents had maybe a 160-day growing season. We don't have one here. We get frost year-round. This white stuff is snow. Anyway, so I'm very, very happy with that. You probably recall I ran a soil test last year. The soil was fairly out of balance here at this place. If you're new, welcome. This is only our second year gardening at this little homestead. And most of our problems were excesses. If you want to know more about the in-depth behind all this, I highly recommend several books. The Intelligent Gardener. I'll try to remember to link to these down below. Forget what it's called. Home Fertilizers and Plant Nutrition or something by Nigel Palmer. I'm totally screwing up the title on that. I'll link to that. And another book I can't think of right now about gardening that are a lot of the basis of what I've been doing here. But based on the soil mineral test results where I had a lot of excesses, and you can't just go take stuff out of the soil. It's like if you get too much salt in your soup or something, you can't take it out. You could double the soup recipe and balance it back out so it's not way too salty, but you can't take it out. We had specifically a real excess of calcium here. That was this whole area in general. It has calcareous soils because of the kinds of rock that we have here in the mountains. But I was able to add several mineral amendments last fall. It seemed to make a massive difference in balancing things out. I ran a test again this year. It's not something I do every year, but I'm trying to get a feel for how I'm getting the soil in balance here on this place. And saw pretty big improvements. Now the specifics of that probably have no translation to your soil. Maybe you have a calcium deficiency. Maybe you have an excess of something else. You can kind of think of the different minerals in the soil as like if you have a whiskey barrel, like I've got over there as a bird bath, and the different staves, if one is low and one is high and one is here as you go around the circle of the barrel, it only can support so much, as much water in there as the very lowest one. Even if you got plenty of this and plenty of that, if one board only comes to here, everything's going to drain out from there. Anyway, so we got it fairly in balance. When I got the mineral test results, I know what you want. Can't throw when I'm sitting. This year it was really encouraging. Things were much more in balance, not perfect, but much more in balance. Nearly doubled the soil organic percent since the year before, which was awesome. That's probably largely due to the cardboard and wood chips that I filled in the bottom here when I filled these beds. Those have broken down fairly much, plus all the compost and such added last year. And so I had just the few mineral amendments that were recommended still this year. Then what's gone on here other than that is all of the chicken manure that was cleaned out of the barn, the last year's worth of chicken manure. And now I'm adding my year-old compost. Some of this isn't super broken down. I didn't have it in a good location because we set that compost pile up before we'd done anything else on the property. I wanted it to be out of the way of all the other building projects. Didn't get enough moisture on it through the year, and we're so dry here that it just didn't break down as well as it could have. But it's still a good mulch, and it'll keep breaking down into there. And then the last thing I have to do on here is I have a couple buckets of liquid plant juice. Again, that book whose name I'm forgetting has a good description of that, or check out Hugh Richards' YouTube channel. He describes a lot of this stuff. I'd made that earlier in the summer, actually planning to use it as a foliar spray on the crops, and that was when we got sick and I never got it done. So now it's just sitting there in buckets. I'm not going to try to keep it defrosted or anything till next summer. So my plan is to just hose that down on top of this, to just add those minerals from the plant's fermentation and the microbes and such into this to help the compost and manure and all this layer further break down into the soil. So I'm just layering this on top. This is what I've done every year. It seems to work well. The produce, I think, speaks for itself. If this is your first video, this looks pretty boring and dead, but go check out all of the harvesting ones recently and through the year of everything we've grown. So I got to get that finished. I think I got one more day of sunshine before the snow comes back for real and probably doesn't leave again for the year. But this is the most important time of year for a garden. So whether you've been gardening for a while, I highly encourage you to add any of your fertilizers, amendments, compost and such at this time of year, especially if it's about to go into winter, which may be a little bit from now for some of you, so you probably got some time. Or if you're like in a new place or you want to start gardening for the first time, this is an excellent time, even though it may be too cold, though there's probably most of what I grow in the summer you could grow in the winter. But even if you're not going to grow a winter garden, and not plan anything till spring, this is an excellent time to get everything going. Pick out a spot of soil, mulch it with stuff, compost it. If you're trying to kill grass or something, you can even tarp it like I did over there to kill the sod out from under. This is an excellent time to prepare because most of my success this year came from doing these steps last year, and I expect any success I have next year to come from doing these steps this year. And as far as the mineral amending, that should be something that I think after this year I probably won't even, unless I see some major issue next year, I probably won't even test again. I have got a good feel now for what I started with here on this property and what I need to do, whether it's in this garden bed or around the trees or in a new garden or any of those things. So that's really useful knowledge. But what I will keep doing every year is adding the fermented plant juice and the compost and the manures and all of that. And I expect to get excellent harvests in general, though we had total crop failures of the brassicas, for instance, because of flea beetle infestation that was, county-wide, just decimated everything in that family this year, and so on. But like somebody said, gardening is probably a 75% proposition. Every year, some 25% of something is going to fail because of some reason. But even given that, and I think we would have had a couple hundred more pounds of produce than the approximately 600 we got if we hadn't had that failure. Privately, I probably shouldn't say this out loud on camera, privately, with doing this and hoping for reasonably good weather, I'm going to see if I can get this 600 square feet to produce 1,000 pounds of food for Clay and I next summer. Won't know till the end of next year if that happens, but just wanted to show you what I'm doing here. Again, the specific mineral amendments I'm adding have probably nothing to do with your soil. It's fairly inexpensive to run a soil test if you want to have some idea of what you're starting with, if you can tell from very poor plant growth that you have a real imbalance you're starting with or something. Logan Labs does those. You can go back a few years ago and see how I did one of those in my old clearing. But you may live in a place with pretty generally balanced soils. Like I got family that live in Iowa and they got beautiful, rich, dark topsoil, and maybe no reason at all to run such a thing. Just start adding compost and manure and just make it even richer. Anyway, to see the results both in the produce that we've gotten to eat and preserve to enjoy through the winter, and have those observations fairly well duplicated on a paper results of the test, with giving me a little tips of what I needed to still work on. That was really, really encouraging. We had a wonderful year of the garden, even though we had still record heat, and we had like 2 6-week spells with no rain, and in between all that we had freezes. So given all that, we still produce a lot of food. And some people hear those totals and they say, oh, what do? Do you sell at a farmer's market? No, some people have no idea, I think, how much food, people actually eat if you're producing a year's worth of it, and not just buying a little bit, every week or every few days as you go. And that was all entirely eaten by Clay and I, or preserved, like the potatoes are still in crates, or the beets are pickled, or, that kind of thing, to be enjoyed through the rest of the year until things are growing out here again. So that's not even quite all the vegetables we eat through a year, but it made a substantial dent in our food supplies, needed for the year. So that is wonderful. Like I said, I always hope for the next year to be a little better. So I'm getting chilly out here. I'm going to go in and sit by the wood stove and finish, hopefully get this finished up tomorrow. But I wanted to share that with you guys and encourage you, because probably most of you have hard freeze up and winter coming later than I do. This is an excellent time of year to take care of all this kind of stuff, because like I said, the success for next year, the success this year came from doing this last year. The success for next year is going to come largely from this, because really what I've learned over the years is what you need to do is take care of the soil, both the minerals and the microbes and the fungus and all that. That's part of why I never turn these beds, not any more than get disturbed by, pulling up some of the root crops. I don't want to disturb their fungal networks or their little hotels of microbes or anything any more than I absolutely have to. And as long as I take care of the soil pretty much takes care of the plants, and the plants take care of us. So it's a wonderful cycle. So I just want to encourage you guys to do the same thing. And if you don't want to have 600 square feet of garden space, try a little 4 square foot bed and look at, people say, what should you grow? Well, I don't know. What do you eat? If you eat lettuce all the time, that's one of the most expensive crops per pound. I think lettuce per pound sells for more than steak. So if that's something you eat regularly, make a little bed and plant some lettuce in it. If you love garlic, like I do, make a little bed and plant some garlic in it. Just try something. Don't plant something you hate and would never eat, but try something. You can probably make a couple square foot bed on almost any size of property, or if you don't even have any ground at all. I grew for years when I lived in town in a, excuse the plane overhead, got a lot of people around here who have little planes and seem to like to fly over when I want to record a video. When I lived in a townhome in town with a roommate, I grew stuff in planters on the back deck. And if you haven't got any of that, grow at least sprouts indoors on your windowsill. Got lots of videos about how to do that. Anyhow, that's the fall garden wrap up, and once I get all this done, I consider it put to bed for the year, and then it gets blanketed with snow, and we'll probably see it in April, May, or June of next year, depending how fast spring comes next year. Hope you guys had a wonderful gardening season with successes, even if you had failures as well, just like we did. So at the beginning of this, you saw me sprinkling around a few mineral amendments like ferrous sulfur heptahydrate and so on, which again probably is not applicable at all to what your soil happens to need. What I'm doing now is spreading our compost on, but I wanted to throw out a quick note. I've talked about this before, but it's been a lot of years, about compost and mulches. If you are not aware of the issues with amylopride, there's a whole family of chemicals. I think they're sold as Grazon and such that are used in grazing products. They do not break down even when a something like a horse or a cow eats the grass, they do not break down in a compost pile, and they will kill almost everything in your garden for anywhere from 3 to 10 years. If you are not aware of those, please, 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 before you get hay, manure, or anything like that from any other source, look into that and know what you're doing so you don't ruin your whole garden. Our compost here all came from products on our property that I knew what went into, but that is a big deal.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Come back next time for more adventures.
Thanks for watching.